Well, that's right, John. There are many questions about what happened here yesterday, not least, how is it possible that the braying, marauding masses managed to storm the Capitol building when the protest itself was heavily trailed, not least by the president for days before and just hours earlier when he used that language when he stood up in front of the White House and openly encouraged them, coerced them to march on Congress and take back control. Now Donald Trump will be hoping his early morning semi-concession, if that's what you can call it, will be enough to keep him in power and to calm the real sense of anger and outrage here. But I can tell you there are growing calls today for Mike Pence, the vice president, to invoke the 25th Amendment, a very rare thing which allows, I'll give you the definition, for the removal of the president from office if he or she is deemed to be unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. There's a lot of talk about the mental state of the president right now, especially after what happened yesterday. It would need the approval too of the majority of the cabinet. And I can tell you also that articles of impeachment have been drawn up today too. There is a definite sense that Donald Trump's days are numbered.
As night fell on a stunned Washington, heavily armed officers moved in, forcibly pushing back protesters who defiantly dug in outside the Capitol.
The curfew has just passed. Police have now been replaced by the National Guard. They're tapping their shields and they're giving the same message: move back.
These officers are breaking their oaths. They're allowing an election to be stolen, and they're backing up the people that are stealing it.
We're just out there making our voices heard, and then they start throwing tear gas.
Others defended a president who just hours earlier had publicly urged his supporters to march on the Capitol and fight back.
Didn't he tell them to be here?
Did he tell us to be here?
He encouraged us to be here to support our country.
Exactly.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength.
USA! USA!
This is what that strength looked like. Having reached the steps of the Capitol and with Trump's words ringing in their ears, the marauding masses pressed ahead, scrambling past the scaffolding erected for the inauguration and eventually breaking into the Capitol building itself. With police guarding the center of the world's biggest democracy, seemingly caught off guard and unable to hold them back. As the events played out on live TV to stunned audiences around the world, the angry mob infiltrated the corridors and offices, as inside, the ceremony to certify Joe Biden's election victory was brought to an abrupt halt.
And it will stand in recess until the call of the chair.
At one point, some even tried to break into the chamber.
Everybody stay down! Get down!
Forcing police to barricade the door with furniture, handguns cocked. In the melee, a protester was shot by police and later died. 3 others too lost their lives.
But you have to go home now. We have to have peace.
Holed up safely inside the White House, the president praised his supporters as special people as he urged calm through gritted teeth, but still used the same incendiary language he'd invoked hours earlier to egg them on.
There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election.
The video tweet was later removed and the president blocked from Twitter for 12 hours for severe violations of its policies. The protesters were eventually overcome, and with the Capitol finally secure, lawmakers reconvened. Many, still numb by the day's events, withdrew their earlier objections to certifying Joe Biden as America's next president.
However, the events that have transpired today have forced me to reconsider, and I cannot now in good conscience object to the certification.
One staunch Trump supporter hoped his 11th hour repudiation of the president would hold sway.
And when it's over, it is over. It is over.
And at 3:44 a.m., it was over.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be
the president and the vice president according to the ballots that have been given to us.
A solemn Vice President Mike Pence gavelled the session, in normal times a pro forma affair, to a weary end. Soon after, with his Twitter account blocked, it was left to one of Trump's aides to post a statement that rightly should have been issued 9 weeks earlier. Even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January the 20th. That it came to violent protesters storming the heart of US democracy will go down as one of the most ugly and profound moments in American history. A day later, the Capitol only now afforded the protection it should have had 24 hours earlier.
Well, in the last few minutes, Elaine Chao, the Transportation Secretary, has become the first cabinet member to say that she will resign from Donald Trump's cabinet. She, the wife of Mitch McConnell, the senior Republican senator. Others are expected to follow. There's been a lot of talk about cabinet members potentially resigning ahead, maybe of invoking that 25th Amendment. Remember, they would need to give their majority support for that to happen. A number of White House staff have also resigned overnight, perhaps the biggest among them, the First Lady Melania Trump's chief of staff. And big questions really about the role of the police here and their seemingly unprepared nature for what was going on, despite the fact that this protest was heavily trailed. There were thousands of people in DC yesterday, staying all over the place. I had many of them up by my house. There was no way, people are saying, that the police couldn't have realised that this was about to turn very nasty. There was a press conference this morning with the DC chief of police who said that 68 people have so far been arrested. But I have to say there have been many comparisons to the scenes that we saw in some of those Black Lives Matter protests where, multiple people we saw with our very eyes last year during those protests, peacefully demonstrating, but who were pinned on the floor and immediately taken away, arrested. They have said that they are scanning hotels today and airports to find some of those riot suspects. In the meantime, I think you mentioned earlier, John, that Joe Biden is currently speaking, and he said what happened yesterday. He described it as an assault on the rule of law, and he said, do not call those people protesters. They are domestic terrorists.
Siobhan Kennedy. Well, one of those inside the building when the demonstrators burst in was newly elected Republican representative for South Carolina, Nancy Mace. I spoke to her earlier and began by asking her for her reaction as the Capitol was stormed.
When I woke up this morning, I started looking at the news clips and the video and saw the culmination of all of it. And it's just so heartbreaking. I am more sad today than I was yesterday. I'm angrier today than I was yesterday. I am pissed off that we allowed this to happen. And I'm more convicted today that rhetoric has real consequences.
It was Donald Trump's rhetoric, wasn't it, that ignited this? Are you angry with him specifically?
It was all the way down. We saw it with fringe members of the Republican Party taking advantage of voters' hearts, minds, and wallets. People raising money off of a rigged election and voter fraud when voter fraud hadn't been adjudicated or investigated in any way, shape, or form at this juncture. Again, millions of people were misled to believe that the Vice President of the United States had the ability to overturn the results of the Electoral College and make President Trump president for another 4 years. And thank God we had Vice President Mike Pence yesterday morning step up and say that was not true. And so I appreciate his leadership. I'm urging all leaders across our government to step up, to ask people to be peaceful, to listen to both sides. We cannot work against violence with other violence. We literally, in one day, wiped out all of the accomplishments of the Republican Party of the last 4 years.
Right. Do you feel any guilt yourself? Do you have any pangs of conscience?
No, I mean, I'm just shocked that this could happen. I really, really, truly am.
You took Donald Trump's endorsement. You've also joined in question marks over the fairness and accuracy of the vote. You took part in photo calls as a new congresswoman that were questioning, the legality of the vote. I mean, aren't you also part of this?
There are still places where we are questioning the votes. I've talked to state lawmakers in Pennsylvania, for example. There's voter fraud in every election, and some elections is worse than others. It could be as simple as a machine that breaks down, or someone who believes they're registered to vote, but because they're not in the voter rolls, they cast a provisional ballot. I do believe that this is something that we need to take seriously, but the vote yesterday on the Electoral College was not the place to do it. You cannot investigate or adjudicate any allegations of voter fraud.
So you are part of this, is the point. I mean, you are now contextualizing what you said in the past. And I know, to be absolutely fair to you, you are not one of the, the most vocal Trump supporters in that respect. Your social media feed is not full of the same stuff that he was pumping out. But you have joined in the repetition of those allegations. Should you not step back and say, I was wrong too?
No, I don't. This is investigating allegations of voter fraud is not inciting violence in our nation's capital. That is not what's going on.
This was not something that just came out of nowhere. Do you now see that you were supporting a man who had fascist tendencies?
No. I am shocked that it led to this. And, I used very strong language yesterday, urging our leadership in the White House and across all levels of government to urge this to end and to peacefully go home.
Well, isn't the right thing to remove him from office now before he does something even worse? I mean, would you vote for impeachment if that comes before you?
Impeachment have been filed, and I don't know that we're even going to be back in session before January 20th. And he has promised yesterday or last night that there would be a peaceful transition of power.
Do you believe him?
I hope and pray that he keeps his word, and I do believe him. I think that most people that woke up this morning, when you look at the images and the video of what happened yesterday, I am more in shock today than I was yesterday. And when there is a problem, we've got to acknowledge it. We've got to acknowledge there's an issue. We've got to take steps to be proactive, to solve it. And I want to be part of the solution going forward. I do not want to be part of the problem. And I will not lie to the American people.
What do you think should happen to all those senior people in your party who have supported Donald Trump and kept him where he is? The Mitch McConnells, the Lindsey Grahams. Do they need to now say sorry and to get off the stage so the Republican Party, which has now been roundly defeated, can rebuild?
We were roundly defeated on Tuesday night, and I do believe that the rhetoric that we've seen over the last few months is one of the reasons that we lost in Georgia Senate races. I would encourage folks to go and listen to the speeches of Senator Mitch McConnell, Senator Mike Lee, Senator Lindsey Graham last night, and listen to those messages. I do believe that their hearts are in the right place, and they want what is best for the American people.
Wasn't last night too late? If it took until last night to stand up for your country, wasn't it too late for all these people you've just cited?
No, I don't think it's ever too late. And for more than a week now, I've been talking about the Electoral College process and the certification process and what that means. I think that we all have a tremendous amount to learn from.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, now let's talk to the long-serving Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Congresswoman Lee, what do you make of those people, like our previous guest, the newly elected Nancy Mace, Republican, who claimed there was electoral fraud constantly, but who now says she's shocked by the storming of the Capitol?
I don't see how anyone can be shocked, unfortunately, because we've had the last 4 years of really working with and knowing who this president is. And first of all, we know that he really continues to incite violence. He has from day one. I mean, he has talked about, standing down and using the language of hatred and using words that incite violence. And so for those who are just now realizing that he has been a national security threat all along, well, that's fine, but we've known that since day one. And by him inciting the anger and the violence, which he has done over the years, it didn't just start this week, but he has been inspiring his supporters to engage in actions that are violent and that incite more violence, and that really put people at risk and in danger of being hurt or killed.
Well, now, you've been in Congress for more than 20 years. When this thing started, what did you think was happening?
Well, quite frankly, first I was in Congress when unfortunately, two Capitol Hill police officers were shot. I was in Congress during the horrific events of 9/11. And so I know, and we all know, that the Capitol is a high-risk target, both for international and domestic terrorism. And so I've been following Donald Trump for 4 years. And in the last month, social media has kind of laid out what the plans were. He has said that publicly, what he wanted to see happen at the Capitol. So this was nothing new for me and for many of our colleagues. I actually wore tennis shoes yesterday, knowing that how violence erupts and what takes place when there's hatred spewed all over the place, especially by the commander-in-chief of the United States. I think what happened, though, was...
Now, can I just...
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to know what you think should be done now with Donald Trump himself. Should he be allowed to complete his term?
No, I support, he's impeached already. I support another impeachment of Donald Trump, and I support evoking the 25th Amendment, because he is a national security threat, and we need Republicans and Democrats to come forward and remove this man from office. This is a dangerous moment, not only for our democracy, but for a person who is delusional in many respects, to have such high information, such high national security authority. And so I think it's time for him to go. I also know that
Congresswoman,
we need to...
I'm so sorry to cut you off in the middle there, but
that's okay.
Thank you very much indeed for talking with us. We wanted to know exactly what you thought, and you've told us. Thank you so much.